So welcome. Allison, do you want to do just a quick intro and then we'll jump in on our agenda?
Yeah, I am. Just having a couple technical delays. There we go. All right. So thank you everyone for coming. We are here to celebrate 20 years of RETAP. We have a lot of speakers prepared for you to talk about the different aspects of the program and some of our major wins, what we see for the future. So my understanding is we're going to hop into some individual rooms and in smaller groups and get to know each other a little bit. So I hope some of you might have some questions about RETAP that we can answer. Otherwise, I am excited for all of you to meet these wonderful, smart, experienced people who are willing to share all of their knowledge with all of us. Um, and I'm just excited for y'all to learn a little bit more about RETAP. It's a really cool program. It's a free service that we provide. Um, and I just think it's so great and unique. There aren't many other programs like this in other states in the US. So um, really, really cool that we get to do this and provide this service and see all the benefits it brings to the state. So with that, should we hop into our breakout rooms?
Okay. All right, Allison, I am kicking things back to you.
Excellent. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Oh, could we go to the next slide? You can see what the agenda is. I'm sure you all got that. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, do I have another one after that? There we go. All right. Hi. Thanks again for joining us today to celebrate the past 20 years of RETAP. I'm Allison Cameron, the RETAP administrator. I'm going to let the RETAPers who've been around for the history of this program to speak more to that. I've been overseeing the administration of RETAP for almost 3 years now, and in that time, each of the RETAP consultants have proven time and again what valuable knowledge and skills they have to offer. I'd like to quickly highlight some of the more recent achievements of the group. So between 2017 and 2019, RETAP consultants completed 66 facility assessments throughout Minnesota. A facility assessment includes collecting and analyzing the utility bills and doing an on-site assessment, and then drafting a report on findings that include recommendations for energy savings and resources for guidance and next steps and funding opportunities. The recommendations provided by RETAP during that window of 2017 to 2019 total over $130,000. The time period also experienced a reported 92% rate of completed and planned follow through on implementation of recommendations from the reports. So that's a huge uptick from the past. And for me, that was proof that the improvements that we've made to the report over the years have really, really worked. CO2 diversion rates were added to RETAP reporting in 2017. Based on follow-up reports that track the implemented recommendations, our report generating software calculates CO2 diversion rates for completed, planned, and also the missed diversion of what the clients do not plan to follow through on. If the clients from 2017 to 2019 had implemented all the recommendations in the reports, 2,395 tons of CO2 emissions could have been avoided. The actual diversion rate was not much lower. The actual diversion rate was at 2,154 tons of CO2. So that's a pretty big impact for a small free service. So this means on average, RETAP had the sequestration power of 963 acres of mature US forest each year. Electrical usage reductions through equipment upgrades, retrofitting, and suggested behavioral changes are highlighted and the main focus of our reports. The electricity recommendations made between 2017 and 2019 added up to over 2 million kilowatt hours. This equates to 8.1 rail cars worth of coal burned at a power plant. We have a new retapper, relatively new retapper, Patrick Holt, who has introduced a solar feasibility assessment to our reports. It's just one more way that we provide the information to clients that they need to make decisions about how to make impactful changes at their facilities that reduce their energy consumption. Fuel recommendations have also made impactful reductions. The average fuel reductions for recent years is equivalent to taking 58 cars off the road each year. A promising change I've noticed from some of the older reports I've looked through is the drop in waste recommendations because many of the RETAP clients have already addressed major waste management issues. The recommendations for decreasing water usage for 2017 through 2019 added up to 58,348 gallons of water. All right, so that's the end of my little spiel. I'm going to turn the presentation over to our next speakers. So the next one's up, our community sustainability team. This is Barb Thoman and Michael Orange. They've completed 11 different assistance projects, plans, and reports over the last couple years. And while we don't continue to follow up on their work after it's been completed, it's no doubt that it provides great benefits to the community. So I'm going to pass it over to you two.
Well, good morning. My name is Barb Thoman, and I joined RETAP in 2018. Previous to that, I had been at a nonprofit Transit for Livable Communities for nearly 20 years. And before that, I was at the Pollution Control Agency for 10 years working in the solid waste management unit. I was approached by 3 MPCA staffers with whom I still kept in contact, and they had talked with me about expanding the RETAP assistance that's given to municipalities through the GreenStep Cities program. They wondered if I'd be interested in joining the team. And of course I was. And for those of you that really don't know that much about GreenStep Cities, it's a voluntary, now I'm not seeing my slides, I'm seeing Michael. Are the slides still up on the screen?
Yes, for everyone else, Barb.
For everyone else, okay. I don't know why that happened. So GreenStep Cities is a voluntary challenge assistance and recognition program. It's open to all cities in Minnesota. I think currently there are 144 cities participating. And the cities are challenged to implement programs or projects in 5 different categories. And land use and transportation are 2 of those, and those are the areas that I propose to do some work in. So my assistance, the assistance that I proposed was to work on something called road conversions and then also parking reform. And because the road conversion issue was more timely, I said, let's start with that. So could we go to my next slide?
Yes, thank you, Alexis, in the chat. Good reminder. I spotlighted Barb and Michael so that you can see their faces, but that means on your screen it probably reduced the size of the slides, and you can just click on those and it'll make them big again for you. And Ren, I see your hand raised. Do you have a technical question or something else?
It was that the slide had become only like 1 inch big, but I figured out how to change it.
That's working now? Okay,
Thank you.
If that's a pain for anyone, let me know and we can get rid of Barb and Michael's faces. All right. Sorry about that, Barb.
Okay, next slide. There we go. So these road conversion projects, which some of you may have heard of them referred to as road diets, we're encountering resistance at the local level. The projects made a lot of sense, but the proposers, maybe MnDOT, a county, a city, was getting pushback from sometimes elected officials, sometimes community members, and sometimes even a local engineer. But these projects to convert 4-lane roads to 3-lane roads have a lot of benefits, including environmental benefits. And so we thought, how can we help make the case for these projects? The projects make space for biking and walking, and that's partly how they help the environment by reducing vehicle trips. They also slow traffic to closer to posted speeds, and they're safer for everyone, for drivers and for other users. But change is hard, and there weren't really many local examples, many Minnesota examples to point to. So my contribution through RETAP was to document some of these local examples, because when I started, the only information that was available was a manual from the Federal Highway Administration, and its Midwest examples were Michigan, from Michigan and from Iowa. So I set out to develop some case studies for projects in Minnesota. And the communities that had been pioneers in this area at the time were Albert Lee, Battle Lake, Parkus Prairie, Richfield, and then certainly some projects in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and a few of the suburbs. So I went out to these communities. I talked with people there. I talked with their engineers. I got before and after crash data from MnDOT. I took some photographs. And then I worked with a number of folks to get these case studies up on the website. And so the picture that you see here is a picture of downtown Battle Lake after a 4 to 3-lane conversion. We also hosted a webinar. So you can go to the next slide, please. So this is we decided to house these case studies on the MnDOT website because people often come to MnDOT for information, and they had sort of a rudimentary page about road conversions. And so this is it's not more visible, but if you just Google, Road Giant MnDOT or road conversions, this will come up. But all of the case studies are on the MnDOT website, and if you were able to scroll down here, you would see a pretty lengthy description of what took place in Richfield, and then on the bottom right here are the case studies from the other cities. So that was the idea, and these projects have now had much more wide application or implementation all across the state. And so, Ramsey County just did a study of 22 roads and looks like they're going to do conversions on very many of these. So anyway, this was a way to give these projects a push. So next slide, please. So my current project, that project took about 2 years. My current project is parking reform, right sizing and right pricing, off-street parking. And many municipalities established their parking requirements using data from the same national source. And later the statistics in that manual were found to be really questionable. They were based on the highest use date. There were very few data points. All the data points were suburban in locations where it was very difficult to walk, bike, or take transit. And so all across the state, you have communities that have parking codes that require too much parking. And that's why we often see so many overbuilt parking lots that are really designed for the busiest day of the year, like the Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. And the rest of the time, a lot of these parking lots sit mostly or partially empty. So let's go on to the next slide. So why parking reform? Well, from an environmental standpoint, parking reform is really important. One reason is the urban heat island effect. Areas that have lots of impervious surface can be 9 degrees hotter on a hot summer day than areas that have very low impervious surface. So that's a lot of extra energy required to cool locations where there's a lot of this impervious surface. We also have a tremendous amount of stormwater runoff that comes from parking lots. And I had another RETAP member help me make the calculations, and about 5,600 gallons of water runs off one surface parking space in an average in an average year in Minnesota. So that's a lot of water that needs to be managed, and with climate change, that's also a lot of flood risk. In addition, there are other benefits of parking reform that have to do with increasing or encouraging transit use, biking and walking, improving housing affordability. Building parking in multifamily projects is very expensive and adds to the cost of monthly rent, even for people who don't need the parking space. And then there's the lost property tax revenue for cities. So parking reform means more robust city finances. So next slide, please. So what I did, oh, sorry, I should have said this before. This I should have said next slide, please. Look at this a minute, and then we'll move on. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. So what we've done is I put, oops, now, actually, we're missing a slide here. Can you go back one? Huh, yeah, there's a missing slide. Oh, well. The main project so far with this work is that I developed a guidebook for cities about parking. It's 13 pages long. I had help from consultant Lance Bernard from HKGI and Lucy Galbraith. Ah, there we go. I guess they're just a little bit maybe they're a little out of order. The guidebook is really a how-to, first a why for parking reform, and then a how-to on how to do it, and kind of a checklist for cities on looking through their zoning code and deciding what elements of the code really need to be updated. And at the back, then, there's a list of resources. Next slide, please. Okay. So the next step with this work, I think, is to really promote this guidebook more widely. I'm also working on a case study report showing what cities have done, what sorts of things in terms of parking reform. We have a webinar coming up on the 17th of November. And then I'm providing ongoing technical assistance to cities as they begin to make changes and begin to look at parking reform as a community sustainability strategy. And then my hope is really that some agency will take on this work in a bigger way, because there are so many benefits to parking reform. And it really needs an agency or someone that is working more than a few hours per week on it, like I am, to take it on. So maybe that's Met Council, maybe it's PCA, maybe it's MnDOT, but I'm hoping that we can get an agency interested in taking on that work. So next slide, please, or last slide, please. So I just have appreciated being a part of the RETAP team, and I really enjoy being able to share the skills that and the things I learned over the last 20 years, 25 years working in transportation with municipalities across the state and working with just a lot of wonderful people. So thank you very much.
Are you taking questions?
I mean, I would. I don't know what the the agenda's like. So I think I've already gone over a little bit. So I don't want to take from Michael's time.
Okay.
What do you think, Allison?
Yeah, if we could save questions for the Q&A in about 20 minutes, that would be great.
Hey, Michael. I muted you because you got up to move around at one point. So on your phone, if you would unmute yourself. Oh, I broke it. No. All right. Sorry, everyone. Can I have you hang up the phone and have you call back in really quick? So maybe if there's questions for Barb, this would be a great time to ask any.
Okay. Let's see. Are the questions in the chat? If there are, let's see here.
I'm
No.
sorry. This is Patrick. Can I ask you a question, Barb?
Oh yeah, please do.
I live downtown Minneapolis, well, northeast, they refer to. And so we've got a lot of these big old homes that have been converted into 4 and 6 unit rooming houses, basically. And then also, of course, they're building a lot of about 12, 14 unit smaller apartment buildings.
Right.
With the removal of the parking lots, have you seen the impact on snow removal? Because I know I certainly have living here, and I just wondered how that factored into your, into your this quote, how you calculated that.
I'm sorry, did you say snow removal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we talk about in the guidebook is being sure that these municipalities consider snow storage as part of their strategy when they're looking at revising their parking code. And in cities that are winter cities that are more dense, one of the costs that may be incurred for a city that reduces the overuse of parking is snow removal out of town. Moving snow removal to a remote location in a more dense urban environment when you have to take it off sidewalks or walkways or even other parking spaces.
I was thinking more of the cars, because there's a higher density of cars parked on the streets.
Right.
I mean, people use bicycles in the summer, but they don't use them in the winter. So you end up with, say, 40 cars parked on the street, now raising that up to 60 and 70 cars parked on a given area. The removing of snow becomes problematic with more people just sort of leaving their cars abandoned till, while the snow are being removed. I just, because there's a cost to removing those cars, I'm sure.
Certainly. One of the things that cities are starting to do is look at, the opportunity cost that comes with off-street parking and not charging anything for it, because it isn't free. Like you said, it costs a lot of money to remove snow from city streets and from parking spaces. And so, how can we, move closer toward having people pay the full cost of vehicle use, which includes storage, which includes parking. And so one of the things that we talk about in this report is how much the cost of parking adds to monthly rent. And when you separate the cost of the parking space from the unit, people often make different choices about how many cars they own. When they live in a location where transit, bike, and walk is possible, and people who don't need a vehicle then are not subsidizing the parking for people who do need one. So I wonder if we should end it so that Michael can begin his presentation.
Yes, I think we have
But
Michael
I'd love
on
to
now.
talk more, and maybe we could even talk, later afterwards on the phone or something,
Or
about
join
parking.
the
Love to
November
talk.
17th workshop.
or come to the workshop.
Okay.
If I can find a
Kristen, can
parking
you hear me
spot.
now?
If you can find a parking spot. It'll be on
It's
Zoom, so you
virtual.
don't have to
It's
park.
virtual only. Yes, Michael, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. So first of all, thank you for the invitation to describe my 14 years as a retapper. And it kind of begins 14 years ago after I had a 30-year career as a city planner, environmental manager for the city of Minneapolis. I retired in early 2007 and was ready to launch a new career. I thought I would become an environmental consultant. And so I sent out a bunch of letters to local environmental groups and consultants, and nobody got back to me. I heard about RETAP, but $13 an hour just didn't match my big idea to be a big buck consultant. So my wife asked me, so what do you got going? And I said, well, nothing. So I attended a RETAP meeting in November 2007, and Gail Prest, who is the environmental manager for the city of Minneapolis, asked for help developing a greenhouse gas assessment for the city. And I came home and I told my wife about it, but said it'd be just a ton of spreadsheets and I wanted to do big time policy work. And she asked me, so what do you got going? And I said, well, nothing. So I took on the job as a part of a spin-off branch of RETAP called the Climate Change Corps under the guidance of Paul Moss. The job was gigantic. I'd only begun when I hit the limit for free RETAP hours for a city. So Gail hired me to complete the work as a private consultant. So I launched Orange Environmental. Next slide, please. That's my own consulting company. Oops, I guess I slipped that slide. So let's just go to the next one, please. There we go. And that Minneapolis Inventory was the first modern citywide assessment, greenhouse gas assessment in the state, and the first city operations assessment ever done in the state. And it remains the most complex assessment completed in the state. Since then, I have completed 58 analyses and reports for 44 separate clients, including greenhouse gas assessments for 29 cities in Washington County. And it's all made possible by RETAP launching my private consulting career. And then as a RETAPper, I've had 25 or so larger projects, generally 1 or 2 a year. I've completed 3 greenhouse gas assessments, 3 sustainability studies, 2 zoning analyses, and 12 projects for the GreenStep Cities program, and then 5 reports. I've got another kind of a side angle on dealing with the emerald ash borer infestation and the urban forest. Slide, please. The takeaway from all of this work is I love doing it. And it's not some weird fetish for spreadsheets, although they do for me what Sudoku does and crossword puzzles do for others. The main reason, it's the people. I just work with people who have incredible talent, dedication, and knowledge. And, you know, for example, we're so lucky to have the environmental commitment from the PCA and the agency's professional staff and scientists and experts. I worked with a climate-denying facilities manager who became one of the city's strongest advocates for change. I collaborated with a staffer from another city with no experience in this field, who quickly gained experience, expertise, and guided their city to become a state leader. And I got to learn from these people and grow a lot too in the process. It's an exciting, positive work. Slide, please. So I thought I'd give you a little sample of greenhouse gas assessments. Of course, everybody's familiar with the quote from David Osborne and Ted Gabler. If you don't measure results, you can't tell success from failure. If you can't see success, you can't reward it. If you can't see failure, you can't correct it. The process of developing a greenhouse gas assessment engages city staff and elected officials, and it can highlight anomalies that can lead to corrective action, spikes in energy consumption or orphan meters. And it can lead to you building experts, the other RETAPers, to work your magic for recommissioning buildings. And it's the first step towards follow-up work that's so critical, creating greenhouse gas reduction goals, creating climate action or adaptation plans, resiliency plans, and all of these subsequent studies depend upon an accurate baseline greenhouse gas assessment. Slide, please. So let's look under the hood. Greenhouse gas assessments generally have 3 or more study years. Now there's 2 versions of it. There's a community-wide and then there's a government operations. The table on your right is an example of the detailed summary for the city of Ames. And in that case, I'm measuring the greenhouse gases from energy consumption, electricity, natural gas, renewable fuels, and other fuels for residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional uses. There's transportation emissions from converting vehicle miles data into greenhouse gas emissions. And then we have to estimate the share of emissions from airports and sometimes rail and water transportation. Solid waste management, it's very difficult to do, but it's also, and it only covers maybe 2% of the footprint, but we need to do it. Emissions from landfilling, composting, and waste to energy. Another one that's important is wastewater treatment, and then all of this data needs to be normalized on per capita comparisons, changing electricity emission factors, and then weather. Let's see, next slide, please. Then looking at the other major kind of assessment is the government operations. And this one is actually twice as difficult to do than the community-wide. And the charts on the right are from the city of Ames again. In this case, I look at the government operations assessment as the environmental equivalent of a city budget. I think it's that important. And if you look at the energy consumption by city-owned and leased facilities, you look at the fleets, fuel consumption by public works and the fleets, contractor services. A lot of cities will contract out normal operations like street maintenance and plowing and tree maintenance, and that needs to be calculated as well. You can't just kind of outsource your greenhouse gas emissions. There's official travel, and sometimes we look at employee commute as well. And then again, solid waste management. Next slide, please. What I do then is bring all this information together in what I call a findings report, and I use takeaways, cogent statements from every one of these charts how to tell the story. And the time commitment for these things is that a citywide and government operations assessment involve about 35 interconnected spreadsheets, and I'll usually write a 30-page finding report, about 100 hours. However, Ames, for example, took twice that amount. So let's switch to another version of this, or byproduct of this. Next slide, please. City of Burnsville has been working on this for a long time. I did the initial citywide greenhouse gas assessment back in 2007, and been doing a government operations assessments that covered a 19-year period from 2005 to current. And the first assessments pointed out that emissions from the production of potable water constituted a major portion of their city's greenhouse gas footprint. They just were amazed by it. And they started investing in 2007. They invested nearly $19 million in 28 major improvements to the overall water system. And during that time, they pumped 12% more water in 2017 than in the 2005 base year. There were more sales to other cities, and there were facility and operational improvements resulted in a 67% increase in energy efficiency for the system in 2017 compared to 2005. So that chart on the right compares the cumulative investments, that's the green line, and then the rise of efficiency in terms of gallons per kBTU, that's the red line. The result was a 53% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. That's shown on the chart on the right, which for some reason doesn't really work right anymore. I don't know why it disappeared, but they had set a goal of reducing. I mean, let's go to the next slide. I think it'll tell the story better. There we go. That's good. Let's see. The city had set a goal of 30% reduction by 2025, and they met that goal 6 years ahead of schedule, primarily because of the improvements to their water treatment facilities. Even though they had more space to heat, light, and cool, more water to purify and pump, emissions were 30% lower in 2019 than 2005. Next slide, please. This remarkable story was picked up by the governor's office back in 2018. They were really interested in this and wanted me to dive deeper into it. I did that through RETAP. And so I did a closer study of their water analysis and found that between 2005 and 17, the $19 million investment combined with operational improvements resulted in over $4 million in savings due to improved energy efficiency. Then of course, you look at it from a payback period. It's still a long payback period, an additional 27 years, which is feasible for a city for facilities. But some payback methods wouldn't include the cost to construct a new building. In this case, the city built a new surface water treatment facility. If you took that construction project out, the simple payback period for the improvements would be reduced to about 6 additional years. Next slide, please. One of the key things that came out of this study too was the importance of electricity. About 90% of the energy for potable water system in 2017 came from electricity, the remainder from natural gas. And the cost of electricity, that's dollars per BTU, had increased 31% since 2005. Now you can see on the chart at the right The costs are in red, and the production efficiency in the blue line. That's gallons per kBTU. So in the future, continued increase in energy costs and energy efficiency will shorten the payback period considerably. Next slide, please. The takeaway from all this, it was really confirming to document the direct relationship between the commitment of elected officials and city staff to do the right thing with public resources, and how that translated into energy and cost savings, reasonable payback periods, and the achievement of challenging greenhouse gas reduction goals. All right, I'm going to shift the story a little bit. Next slide, please. I also worked on the emerald ash borer infestation, and that was since the spring of 2013. I've been working with the Minnesota Shade Tree Advisory Committee and Rainbow Tree Care to analyze the effects of the most destructive forest infestation ever experienced in North America from the emerald ash borer. And as a byproduct of this work, I prepared 9 reports on the topic, including 5 as a retapper. You can see the reports there. They include a model landscape ordinance for the municipal zoning code. Everything comes down to zoning for cities in terms of really making a difference. The Pollution Control Agency asked me to look into what would be the effects if cities dealt with all this incredible amounts of waste ash wood, dead ash wood that has to be removed if they did it by open burning. So I did an analysis of that, produced a webinar, and then developed a model EAB management plan for cities. Next slide, please. So part of this analysis on what's the right thing to do in terms of removing or retreating, and I did an analysis of the cost-benefit models for the GreenStep Cities program. It involved 2 spreadsheet-based models that estimate the costs and benefits of preserving mature and healthy city-owned ash trees versus removing and replacing them. So the kinds of things I looked at was a base case, that's no action, in which case virtually all the ash trees die and are replaced over a 10-year period. And then there's a recommended case, which is save the best, replace the rest over the same 10-year period. The study had a 20-year study period, and in which my models grow the trees, and I quantify all the tree benefits: stormwater management, energy efficiency, economic value, safety and human health, and also the costs that include removals, stump grinding, replacement trees, mortality of replacement trees, and treatments. And last slide, please. The takeaway from this, there's the calculator. Obviously, and I can, there we go, thank you. The EAB infestation has awakened cities to the value of their urban forests. And it was exciting to work with the lead scientists in North America and be on the cutting edge of helping cities manage this most expensive and most extensive infestation. Next slide, please. I've been working with the GreenStep Cities program almost from the beginning, with back when Phil Music was heading it up, and now with Kristen. Talk about a great relationship, and many others close to the very start of the program. These reports are a few of the ones that I've worked on. I did a peer review and a summary of the GreenStep Cities program of its the 170 best practice action steps at that time. I think it's about 180 now. Also did the first draft of step 4 of the program. That working with Phil dealt with measurement of greenhouse gas emissions. And then Chris and I just released the new report addressing the sustainability gap in the development review process, a guide for empowering environmental committees. And that's just out. Very excited about that. And it was great working with you, Kristen, on getting that report out. You know, I'm sure I'm over time. I have another slide, but I don't really need to go to it if we're short of time. So I'll stop there unless there's questions.
Great, thanks, Michael. Why don't we keep moving to honor all the work that everyone has prepared for this. So we'll move on to our next speaker. All right, Don, are you ready?
Yes, yes, I'm Don Bailey. I've been associated with RETAP since 2007. Spent most of my time and efforts on database development, developing ASUS, the support system for the RETAP assessment process. ASUS is database system, Microsoft Access database system. It employs Excel for inputs and outputs, as well as the manual inputs, and it exports data to Word, Microsoft Word, for reports and letters and such. Up in the upper right, there are buttons that bring up pop-ups for actions associated with the assessment at hand. In the upper left, there are some peripheral functions that can be opened. Admin is the function where we enter new assessments and manage assignments and such, and also have access to the historical data that Allison talked about at the beginning. Methodology, essentially a reference library containing a definition of the process, the RETAP process, and innumerable references, links, and etc. Okay, so the process begins, of course, with a request for assessment by a client, and the client's data is entered into admin and assignments made there. Then the assessor goes to the home screen on ASUS, and it's a very busy screen, but when he or she first enters, it's a blank screen. And so it starts by entering the client data, the building information, basic information, the contact data. Then the next step is for the assessor to contact the client. And the next thing is to request bill data, utility bill data. And in the metropolitan area, it's possible, especially with utilities such as the Centerpoint and Excel, it's possible to get data in Excel format, which can be imported into ASUS. Outstate, it's a grueling process of taking data from monthly invoices and entering data. So in the upper, the two little boxes at the at the top, on the left one is the bills drop down, where you can select a pop-up for a specific utility and enter the data, the monthly data for a calendar year. On the upper right is the drop down for calculators to calculate the savings associated with recommended improvements. So the process then is first enter the bill data. Building data is entered based on conversations, phone conversations, of a visit to the site, one or two perhaps. The building data then is entered in the building data pop-up, and the site visit, also with the quantitative data that's obtained on the building, there's also the understanding of the systems, the mechanical systems, the HVAC, the lighting, and on and on. So get the data, the building data, the utility bill data, and do the analysis, the research, calculations, consultations, and come up with the recommendations. And those recommendations are entered here on this home assessment screen. Now, as you're accumulating this data and entering it, the summary of that, each element will be shown here on the assessment home screen. So it fills out, and as you go along, you can see where you are You can also see a summary of what you have and what your conclusions you're making on the assessment. So next slide, please. After entering the build data, you can access a building data analysis screen, and the building data analysis with the tabulated data as well as the plotted data. There are two aspects of that are really beneficial. First, with all this manually entered build data, if there's an error, a significant error in your data that's entered, you can often see that in the plotted data. So that's one. It's kind of a quick and dirty review of the data entered. Second, just with a glance, you can tell a lot about what's going on in the building. For example, on the left two columns are the electrical usage data, and below it, the cooling degree days. And looking at the bulge in the electrical usage, when the cooling degree days peak, you can get a feel and a visual assessment of the air conditioning usage, and the system, the ASUS system, computes that and assigns a cost to it. In the middle, it's the same for fuel. At the bottom, the heating degree days, at the top, the fuel consumption, and obvious correlation is there in the picture. And that's fairly typical in Minnesota. 60 to 90% of fuel is associated with heating. And on the right is the water data, upper right is the water data. And this is a really exceptional depiction of water usage. You can see that in the summer years, there's a $400,000 gallon or 400,000 gallon water usage in the month of August. And there's serious problems, obviously, in the irrigation system. And the assessors, Diana and her cohorts, obviously dealt with that and came up with some concrete recommendations to solve the problem. Next slide, please. This is one of the calculators, the savings calculators embedded in ASUS. This one is for lighting. In the left side of the calculator is where you enter the lighting data, current lighting data, configuration data in areas where you can expect to make an improvement. So you enter the current, and on the right you enter the recommended changed lighting configuration, and the system calculates the savings in energy, kilowatt hours, and also in dollars. And it uses the rates that are calculated by ASUS from the build data. Next slide, please. This data will be tabulated in the assessment report automatically. One other new feature in this version of ASUS is energy survey function, which will, through analysis, assign or estimate the energy usage and components, energy usage components of the system and systems in the building. For example, energy for heating, cooling, refrigeration, lighting, and et cetera. And the value of that is to see where the energy is being used, where there appears to be excesses, and where we can make improvements. One of the major improvements in the current ASUS system configuration is portfolio manager benchmarking. The portfolio manager, the EPA portfolio manager, is a benchmarking system, as perhaps many of you are aware, that's used nationwide. 25% of building space, commercial building space in the US is estimated to be benchmarked annually using portfolio manager. And this is new for for RETAP, we're going to use this henceforth and benchmark systems using Portfolio Manager. And the Portfolio Manager benchmarking, you enter the build data and some elemental building data, and you get back a comparison of your building in energy use, EUI, energy utilization intensity, kBTU energy per square foot, and you get an Energy Star score, which is a percentile standing of your building with respect to buildings across the US of your building type. And now that requires some input. First of all, of course, the build data to reflect the energy use, and also, second, some qualifiers. For example, you need to enter data on building square feet, percent the building utilized, percent air conditioned, percent heated. And those data items are used to level the playing field so that you're fairly compared to buildings across the country of your building type. So Minneapolis has been involved in this benchmarking for 10 or 12 years. I've been working with them. I built their benchmarking management system over the years. I'm currently the help desk for the program. They have over 700 buildings that are benchmarked annually. Their score on their standing reflected by their Energy Star scores in the 70th percentile. That's on the scored buildings. Now, the scored buildings perhaps are 40% of total. But anyway, they're doing well, and this benchmarking is meaningful and important to building managers and the building owners. Now, for ASUS, once you've entered the building data on the building data screen, go to the benchmarking data pop up and click on the Excel button, and you get this Excel spreadsheet shown at the bottom. And that's all the data you need now to go to Portfolio Manager and enter and get your score and your benchmark. And the tedious part of this data entry is build data again, but with this pop-up Excel file, you just copy, for example, the red colored data, go to Portfolio Manager, right click, paste, and you've pasted in the 12 calendar months of data. And then you can grab your benchmarks data and enter that into Portfolio Manager. My daughter, Anne, is at the EPA. She manages the Energy Star building product labeling program. She tells me that the Portfolio Manager people are pleased that we're pursuing this activity of benchmarking, and we're taking it to rural Minnesota. The EPA has difficulty reaching buildings out of the metro areas, so it's a plus. It's a pretty interesting and exciting addition here to the role and the mission here at RETAP. And finally, the last slide, please. The assessment process, data entry, benchmarking leads to generation of a report. The ASUS system generates a detailed template for where it's essentially the bones of a report, and the assessor then adds the beef to the report. The template includes tabulated data, tabulated summaries, auto text, lots of text generated from an analysis of the build data, the building data. And so the assessor again completes the report, it's reviewed, and then sent on to the client. On the left is a table of contents. And the idea of this template is to give the assessor a leg up in getting out a report. It's also to standardize the content or the organization and the structure and the table of contents of the report. So with that, I will close. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Don. We are going to skip the Q&A and move on to try and get back on track. So just to summarize how wonderful this report making software is, it's unique to Minnesota. No other RETAP programs have access to report making data like this. So the fact that we are also currently upgrading it, I mean, Don, with the help of some of our consultants, upgrading it to have enhanced graphical representation of the data, it's just a huge service to our clients that it's really wonderful. So we're going to move on to Rick. Rick Person. Are you with us, Rick?
Sorry, Kristen and I are gonna switch here. She's going to
I am muted. Okay. All right.
Rick's there.
And
You had it up, Emily.
did he have it? Rick, do you have your own slides or are we presenting? Because
they're embedded in ours.
Yeah,
okay.
No, you're presenting.
Okay, because I have Tom next. So where's Rick's slides, Kristen?
Yeah.
Intro to him.
Oh, you're right. It does say Tom, history of RETAP.
Or Rick's after that.
Are we going to go to Tom next?
And then we have Rick and Ren after.
Okay. That's the order I had too.
All right, wonderful. Okay, let's move on to Tom. Sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, I will start sharing my screen again. Thank you for being patient with me as I figure this out.
Oh, good morning. This is Tom. Talking about the history of RETAP, we can go to the first slide if you want to. Again, since this is the 20th anniversary of RETAP, obviously we started 20 years ago. In 2001, some industry and MPCA people with foresight, Kevin McDonald of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and Dr. Russ Susag, environmental manager for 3M Company, proposed, sent out a request for proposal to have a program like RETAP started. It was funded by the state legislature through the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. However, it had a questionable start because people in the industry were very concerned that allowing people to go on site to Minnesota businesses would be a quasi enforcement visit, and there might be reports of non-compliance back to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. However, Dr. Susag was able to convince the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce that this was not the case, and the program went forward. The contract was given to Waste Research and Technology Transfer, RET, out of Muscle Shoals, Alabama, who had just started a similar program in the state of Michigan. And they managed the reporting to the client specifically to ensure confidentiality. Back at that time, again, talking about compliance and talking about the businesses revealing their inner workings to regulatory people, or potentially regulatory people, was of great concern. We RETAPers who started in 2001 would go on site. We would evaluate the client's energy data, sans ASUS, of course. We would make recommendations and transfer all of this information to the RET organization in Alabama, they would create the report and send it to the client. No one in RETAP at the Minnesota state level had access to that information, thereby it was kept confidential. As we evolved over the years, RETAP, which at that time was called Retired Engineers Technical Assistance Program, Kevin McDonald of the PCA had a phrase, "A retired engineer is a terrible thing to waste." And that became our mantra for our opening years of existence. Along about midlife, about 2010, 2011, as other people were brought into the organization, it was changed from retired engineers to Retiree Environmental Technical Assistance Program. The same abbreviation, but a slightly different name. And we now have RETAP members of many disciplines, not just retired engineers. One of the things that we had happen, of course, we wanted to bring the RETAP program back from RAT into the state of Minnesota where we could operate it directly. When we did, we no longer had the guidance of RAT. We RETAPers were on our own to visit clients, get the client data, and we each prepared our individual reports without any guidance. And Don Bailey, as a hats off thank you to you, ASUS was a game changer. But prior to ASUS, unfortunately, I think many of our reports to clients were very poorly written and had very questionable recommendations. I recall reviewing some of them, and one RETAPer recommended to a client that they could save 110% of their total energy consumption by implementing our recommendations. Obviously, that was a mistake. So in 2007, when Don Bailey came along and developed ASUS, it converted chaos to order, and we all have been appreciating that. In addition, as RETAP developed in its early years, we wanted to report our results to the MPCA managers with oversight of the total RETAP program. We quantified what we could by summarizing all the potential savings in energy reduction and waste reduction on an annual basis to the MPCA managers, again, hoping to prove our value and to get continued funding through the state legislature. Also along the way, we wanted to find out from our clients, were they implementing the recommendations that we had given them? One of our early members, Gordon Amundson, helped develop the program, the follow-up program, which I believe now is being administered by Ralph Dickinson, that we would contact the clients a year or two or 2 years after the recommendations were sent to them and determine if they had implemented any recommendations and if they had future plans to implement any recommendations. In the early years, we were only getting about 20% implementation, meaning that of the recommendations that we made, only 20% of the value was being implemented by the client. I believe Allison said we're something up towards 70% now, and that's a vast improvement, not only for the client, but for the value that we RETAP are implementing in the state of Minnesota. Another thing I wanted to mention, and this Don alluded to it in his summary of ASUS. One of the first things that added value prior to ASUS was Rand Bedeker's methodology document, which is now a reference inside of ASUS that gives us RETAPers calculation techniques for determining the potential savings of implementing various recommendations. This was the first step in organizing and getting some stability into RETAP and RETAP reports, which was further enhanced by the development of ASUS. Other than that, I think that pretty much says what the early history of ASUS was, our growing pains, but then our successes. And as I like to tell the clients, I believe RETAP offers a win-win-win situation. The client wins because they get to reduce their costs by reducing the amount of energy they consume and reducing the amount of waste they generate. The second win is the state of Minnesota, because when the client implements these recommendations, there's a modest improvement in the environment in the state of Minnesota. And the third win is we individual RETAPers get the satisfaction of having helped. So it's a win-win-win situation. Thank you.
I think we missed a few of your slides there, so we'll go ahead. Thanks, Emily.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. So we're moving on to Rick and Rin. They're going to talk about a little more about how reports are used and the value that RETAP brings to our community.
So actually, this is pretty amazing. It looks like we're actually ahead of time, ahead of schedule.
Yes, we'll have time for questions at the end if you would like to stick around.
All right, if we could move to the slide called Assessment Highlights. It's a pie chart. Total assessments by region.
Can you see the slides? I think I'm on the right one.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, just making sure.
Don and I did some analysis of all of the data that is in ASUS, which is a tremendous amount of data. And this slide summarizes some of it, namely the number of assessments that we have done over the 20-year history of RETAP. Now this only adds up to 375 here, and the actual total is 422 that will be in the next slide, because the first 3 years we don't have any data about those reports. Although Tom recently came across a reference somewhere to the fact that from 2001 to 2003, there were 47 assessments completed, but we've lost track of all of those. So the 375 that we have data about and track, 149 of them have been in the 7-county metro area, which is 40%, and 25% have been in southwest Minnesota, and that's recent. That's occurred recently. Our RETAP, we do not actively market our services. So our clients come to us primarily by word of mouth and by promotion of our services by other entities. So for example, in this case, where we've done 90 assessments in southwest Minnesota, mostly in recent years, that has been a lot of that is due to the fact that the Regional Development Commission down there and also CERTS and others associated with them have promoted RETAP services, and that's why we are the second highest region, and these regions are arbitrary creations by myself, but you get a good sense of the geographic location, and then it drops off from there. So I wanted to mention that about our marketing, and really one reason for that is if we did actively market our services, we would probably have more work than we could actually handle with the number of consultants that we have on board in RETAP. Okay, next slide, please. This again adds up a lot of the data out of RETAP, and we could in fact find the total number of assessments that we did in each year. Again, 2001, 2003, we don't have any data. And we could also add up the recommendations for electricity savings that we made in our reports, in our assessments, and for fuel, which in the 99% of cases is natural gas. Occasionally we've run across buildings that use propane or fuel oil, but that probably hasn't occurred in a number of years at all. And the total dollars associated with those recommendations involving electricity and fuel. So I see now that our recommendations add up to over $4 million in savings if all of our recommendations had been implemented. And Allison mentioned earlier that in the last 5 or 6 years, when we've been doing a better job of trying to track and follow up with our clients, and the response has been much better in the last 2 or 3 years. I think we're actually achieving the implementation of these recommendations, and hopefully we have been throughout the total life of RETAP. You see that number down there, 422 assessments. That represents a considerably more, there are considerably more buildings represented in that 422 figure because, excuse me, I'm getting a little sniffles here. A number of these assessments over the years, a fairly significant number, involved assessing more than one building for that client. So I would guess that the total number of buildings that we've assessed over the 20 years is upwards of 450, 475, something like that. Okay, what is the next slide? I don't know if we got the one in that
I wasn't able to turn the data into a slide. So if you'd like to just speak to that information.
Yeah. I'm going to go through, I arbitrarily picked 6 assessments here to go through briefly to give you a breadth, an idea of the breadth of the assessments that we've done. The building types, the location, the recommendations for savings, and a few other details. I had one slide that I had hoped to get in here, and it shows a table that we've added recently to most of our reports called electrical energy balance. And this is, I don't know if Don mentioned that this is a table that is going to be generated out of the new ASUS 3.0 that we've been working on since Don came back on board in September, I guess, August or September. And Don is with a subcommittee of us consultants, is working, as he mentioned, on updating and upgrading our software, ASUS. And one of the tables that will be in the reports, as I mentioned, is called electrical energy balance. And from our analysis of the uses of electricity in a building, that automatically leads to some of the recommendations that are in the table 1 of our reports, which is the recommendations. The one I was going to show was for a recent one that Tom and I did of the Channel 1 Regional Food Bank in Rochester. And it was astounding. Tom and I found out that 66% of their electricity usage there is for refrigeration. And that's because they have these huge walk-in coolers and freezers from which they distribute refrigerated and frozen food all over southeast Minnesota and even into Wisconsin. So I wish I had remembered to use that as one of my example buildings. But even though that's a huge building with huge warehouses, one of the lesser uses of electricity in that building is lighting compared to refrigeration. Anyway, having said that, without attempting to analyze 375 reports, I think most of us, all of us consultants who work on these assessments would agree that the number 1 recommendation we make in our reports have to do with lighting retrofits, and that there is so much energy to be saved starting about 5, 6, 7 years ago by converting lighting in a building to LED lighting, because the energy savings are so significant. So I think that is no doubt the number 1 recommendation that we make in terms of energy savings and dollar value savings. Number 2 would be just thermostat settings. to decrease the operating temperature in a building during the winter just slightly, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 degrees, and increasing it in the summer has a very significant impact on energy usage. So I would say that that's number 2. And then number 3, we get into adjusting HVAC equipment for better performance. So that gives you a little idea of the types of recommendations that are common in the vast majority of our reports, really. Also, that is related to what we call payback or return on investment. We have a section in all of our reports at the end that talks about this. And you've heard the term low-hanging fruit, which in our way of thinking are things that are easily done with very little cost associated with them. And one of those, again, is setting thermostats higher or lower, depending on summer and winter temperatures. The next one being lighting. The payback for retrofitting all of your lighting to LED in whatever building it might be, the payback is only 2 to 3 to 4 years of doing that. So that's also in the category of a low-hanging fruit. Of course, if you're going to replace your expensive HVAC systems, air conditioning, and furnaces and heating systems, that is much more expensive, and the payback isn't as quick on those retrofits. Anyway, let's just quickly go through these buildings, and let me see if I have any additional comments. This one up in Bemidji is a co-op, food co-op. And I just wanted to point out here that a number of our clients, we've actually done assessments of their building more than once over the years, so that we have seen the progress that they have made, and they have come back to ask us to reassess their building to see how they're doing and make additional recommendations. Okay, next slide. Bolger is in Minneapolis. They're a specialty printing company. They have 2 locations, and we assessed both of them. This one, actually that date is wrong, it's 2016. And they had an earlier assessment, a RETAP assessment in 2007. So they had an assessment in 2007 and 2016. And specifically the 2016 is they needed to have an energy audit for their certification called Sustainable Green Printing Partnership Certification. And this is another thing I wanted to mention, that our assessments, which others call energy audits, can be used for purposes such as Bolger used ours to get a certification that they were required to have to be a printer of their quality and caliber. Also, PACE, which is Property Assessed Clean Energy, will accept our assessments for PACE loans and clients, several of our clients have been involved with the PACE program out of the St. Paul Port Authority, managed by the St. Paul Port Authority. And it's my opinion that our assessments are as good or better than a lot of the energy audits that are done by utilities and consultants around the state. Okay. Yeah, Centenary Methodist in Mankato. By the way, this particular one was written up very recently in the Search newsletter by Chris Meyer, who I think is on the tuned in here. Chris was a RETAP consultant for 3 or 4 years and is the Search Southeast Minnesota coordinator. I wanted to mention that I believe 4 of these assessments that I'm going through here have received Search seed grants to get them on their way to their energy conservation goals. And I mentioned that Search has been instrumental in recommending RETAP services to many building owners around the state. This particular, go back to the Centenary, they worked with the Center for Energy and Environment here in Minneapolis, which works directly with Xcel Energy. If you're an Xcel Energy customer, you can have CEE come into your building and do a very detailed analysis of your lighting. And then they will, CEE will take care of the entire process of getting the rebates, and they provide a 0% loan. And they also take care of the actual retrofit in your building. And this, just wanted to point out that Centenary Methodist in Mankato, for which we did the original RETAP assessment back in 2012, they finally were able to go ahead and do the lighting retrofit program here 9 years later. And using the Center for Energy and Environment saved about half the cost and cut their payback period to, I think it was a 38-month payback on this project. Okay, Austin, next slide. City of Austin was one of our clients. I think I'll go past that one. Go to the last slide, which is Leech Lake Band. Next one. I'll skip City of Austin. We did 4 buildings in the City of Austin. That's all I'll say. The Leech Lake Band. We assessed 6 buildings up there, dating back. It was in February of 2016. And Leech Lake Band, along with a number of other tribal nations in Minnesota, have utilized Search seed grants and other Search assistance, and have done a tremendous amount of work in energy conservation and renewable energy. And Leech Lake, for example, got grants, used the GESP program, which is the Guaranteed Energy Savings Program. And they also got a grant from the DOE. This photo shows solar panels that they've installed there, and RETAP, we didn't have anything to do with the solar program at that time. But our assessments were the basic background for Leech Lake to receive these various grants and loans. And as I mentioned, the tribal nations around the state are doing a tremendous job in particularly in renewable energy projects. Okay, I think that is what I was going to cover, and probably took too much time in doing that. So
we will move on to Rin now. Thanks, Rin.
I will end there.
Are you ready, Rin?
I'm ready. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here and thanks for sticking with us through this presentation. It's been really, really interesting to learn a lot about what each part of RETAP can do. The reason that I'm here today is because of CERTS. I joined CERTS in 2003 as a founding member of Central CERTS and proceeded to be part of that until 2016 when I moved out of the area. And CERTS is wonderful in teaching members about new technologies. When I saw the ad in the paper for RETAP consultants in 2007, I applied, and even though I am not an engineer, I was accepted, and I've completed 45 or so assessments since that time. What I've learned and what our clients have learned over that period is that we have, if I could have the first slide, please. We have a variety of ways that we can help individuals, business owners, counties, cities, other municipalities, nonprofits, and so on, with reducing important aspects of their usage. Not only operating expenses and energy consumption that leads to those operating expenses, but also, as others have mentioned, their water use, their waste production, and now in more recent years, their carbon footprint. These were what we started out wanting to reduce for people. If I could have the next slide. But in the process, we also found out that there were additional ways we could help our clients. We could help them identify issues that their operating equipment might have. For example, motors. Some of the larger buildings that we've assessed have multiple air handling equipment with old motors in it. And we found that by upgrading their motors, they could tremendously reduce their kW costs. The issue of the age of the motors was something that most of our clients who had this have never thought about. They just thought, well, the motor's there and we'll use it until it fails. It didn't occur to them that upgrading to newer motors would help them reduce expenses. Also, we can find dangerous health risks, such as carbon monoxide, that might be exceeding the recommended level. By changing out HVAC equipment, those risks can be removed. We can increase the safety of people's commercial buildings by evaluating the equipment that they have and the facilities where that equipment is located. These aren't things that we started out being focused on, but they're ancillary benefits that come with the RETAP assessments. Could I have the next slide, please? Some of the newer building codes require different ventilation levels. And by testing the ventilation equipment that buildings have, we can notify or alert owners that they need to upgrade their ventilation and other systems to be in compliance with building codes. Same with the doors, the exit doors. If we notice something about their exit doors that aren't correct, they can not only increase their building envelope security, but also their compliance with building codes. Many times when we talk with building owners or local government people, we can make them aware of energy efficient technologies that they were not familiar with. In rural Minnesota, in years past, there's been great resistance to wind energy and solar energy. But nowadays, people in rural areas are seeing the money they can save. Not only farmers who are allowing leasing of their fields to build the solar arrays and the windmills, but also people who are actually putting that technology to use on their buildings. They're saving money. They're becoming more aware of ways that the RETAP assessments can help them. And the next slide. Despite political issues that are currently going on, if you enhance your building's green situation, you're building your reputation in the government world and in the business world can be enhanced by using green energy and using techniques to reduce your energy usage, to reduce your water usage, to reduce your waste production. Where it used to be that if we talked to rural people, they kind of wanted to keep it a secret that they were aware of climate change because of the repercussions from their friends or political organizations. But nowadays it's going the other way. Businesses are proud to be using wind energy, solar energy, LEDs. Not only can we help businesses with their reputation, but we can increase the worth of their business with upgraded equipment, the more secure building envelope, with equipment upgrades. All of these things will make their business more desirable should they be in the situation where they wanted to sell the business or where they need to have it evaluated for some purpose. And the last slide. When you're able to reduce your utility costs as a business, it can make the business more competitive. This is another ancillary benefit of having a RETAP assessment. If your business is in a situation where margins are tight, such as we were talking about with the grocery business or with convenience stores, every dime that you can save not spending on utilities is a dime you can put into marketing or into paying your workers an increased wage. And then finally, the last two ways that an assessment can benefit you. Globally, we've seen that foreign energy sources are not always reliable because of climate change, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the floods. We've seen in our own country greatly affect availability of fossil fuels. And to the extent that we still are forced to use fossil fuels, if you can use American fuels, that's better and more reliable for you than waiting for giant boats to come from other countries. It can increase the security of the energy supply if you're able to use multiple sources, such as wind and solar, which are locally produced. Then you don't have to worry about ships bringing oil or coal companies bringing coal to your local utility. These are benefits we never thought about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, that now become to the forefront of worrying about a business or a county or a city's supply of energy. So these are just some of the ways that a RETAP energy assessment can be valuable and beneficial, whether it's to a nonprofit organization, a municipality, a business. And we hope in the future that there'll be even more benefits that we'll discover. Thank you.
All right. Well, we finished with 2 minutes to spare. So why don't we open it up to questions if anyone wants to unmute themselves or type their questions into the chat. I can address those. All right, maybe no questions. Do you want to chat, Kristen?
Yeah, really quickly, I can share for those of you that are GreenStep Cities or work with communities in your assessment or community assistance as RETAPers. Here's a couple actions in the GreenStep Cities program that relate to the work that you all are doing. And so it's helpful information to share and remind cities and tribal nations in the GreenStep program to add action reports related to the assessments or the projects that they're doing. I did see a question pop up here from Sean. Are there ways to scale up commercial energy efficiency and renewables in addition to energy benchmarking ordinances? Ooh, Sean, that is a big question for 1 minute. Something for us all to think about as we head out. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for sharing. This was really enlightening to just hear, your experiences and the great outcomes that you have seen over the years as a program and as individual members to the RETAP program. And so I appreciate you sharing all of this with us. Allison, anything to wrap up?
Well, I'm seeing a question from Alexis at CERTS. The question is, can you remind us what the eligibility is for being a client for any of these programs? I know we have specific numbers. Do my RETAPers remember exactly what the eligibility is? Rin, maybe?
Now, which programs are getting the
There's a
financial?
dollar figure on it. Sorry. Go ahead, Rin.
Do you mean eligibility for the financial programs? We don't have eligibility for RETAP. We'll take anybody except residential individuals. We do businesses, we do municipalities, we do churches, we do food shelves. Anybody.
We don't tend to have huge clients reach out. But, we have gotten questions, requests from owners of several buildings and some large-ish operations, but a very large operation will tend to, if they're going to do an energy audit, they have a full-time facility management team. And they tend to go for more of the paid services. I'm not sure why that is. It's nice that we don't have to police that, but we tend to work with smaller organizations. All right, any other thoughts on that from the RETAPers?
I feel like we should have some noisemakers or, party something to send you all off with. Yeah, maybe unmute yourself and just give a round of applause to all the great RETAP work.
Yay! Well, let's make our new motto, you call, we'll come. If you're in Minnesota and you're using energy and generating waste, we would like to help you.
Engineering is a terrible thing to waste.
Right, Patrick.
Well, thank you, everyone.